Hey everyone, Paper Fins here. And in this video, we're going to go over the eating habits of various kaiju throughout the Toho monster lot. Because all living things need some type of nourishment to keep surviving, and kaiju are no different, as pointed out in various moments. Well, the answers can be as simple as categorizing some as herbivores and others as carnivores. But there are indeed some oddballs out there that don't fit in either of these categories, and we'll get into those later on. With that said, let's start with the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla, whose main source of food consumption is that of radiation. But in the beginning, that wasn't always the case. In a deleted scene from the first Godzilla movie, Godzilla was originally going to be shown feasting on a cow. However, due to the inconsistency of the scale between both Godzilla and the cow, the whole segment was dropped. Even though this scene was removed, there is still remnants of Godzilla's carnivorous nature left in the film. And we can point out these moments on Odo Island, where Godzilla makes his on-screen debut. One such moment comes when the islanders are trying to catch fish, but lately have been coming out empty-handed. The old man in the village points to Godzilla as the reason as to why the fish have been so scarce, and later brings up that once Godzilla is done feasting on fish, he'll come ashore and begin eating humans, comparing it to an old wives' tale, stating how if the catch wasn't doing so well, the villagers would send out a young girl in the middle of the sea to please whatever beast is consuming the fish. While we never actually witnessed Godzilla doing any of that, it isn't hard to believe that the fish shortage could definitely be his doing. After all, he is near the area, as we soon find out. In fact, after Godzilla's first raid on the island, we hear from Mr. Inada state that 12 cows and 8 pigs were lost. The statement is pretty vague, as it could imply that the livestock has either died or have completely disappeared, being devoured by Godzilla. Yes, you could also say that Godzilla stepped on the animals without him realizing it, just like how people step on bugs without noticing. But you have to remember this cutscene with the cow was supposed to be in the movie. In fact, Godzilla came back to the island not too long after this statement was made, indicating that he knew food was there. I mean, why would he just randomly come back here and not move on to some other place? I mean, yes, that is what happens in the final cut, but when you put the pieces together like this, it makes complete sense why he did come back here. He was hungry and wanted more of that sweet cow meat. Later on in the film Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla and the other inhabitants of Monsterland had sea life to feast on, as pointed out by narration in the beginning of the movie. Godzilla eating sea life can also be hinted at in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, where we see a group of whales, I guess, swimming away from Godzilla, who possibly could have been chasing them as a midnight snack. Starting with the return of Godzilla in 1984, the Big G seems to only have an appetite for radiation, and the franchise moving forward would keep this trait with most incarnations of the character. Though we should also look at other members of Godzilla's race, like Manila, whom in his debut film seems to really like the fruit on Salgel Island, though a later appearance in All Monsters Attack shows that Manila seems to just like fruit in general, as he is shown eating some type of it found on Monster Island. The baby Godzilla's craving for fruit could possibly hint that his papa may also have an appetite for this delicacy, given they're of the same species. Later on in the Heisei period, when the next baby Godzilla would be born, the creature appeared to have a craving for greens, as blatantly pointed out by Professor Omai, who just says that we have a plant-eating Godzillasaur. Speaking of, the first Godzillasaur we see in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is said to be an omnivorous creature. Despite its appearance resembling that of flesh-eating dinosaurs, this type could eat both plants and animals. Speaking of dinosaur-looking animals, we now move on to Godzilla's first American counterpart, where we see the big mutated iguana going after a big helping of fish. It also turns out it was bringing some of that protein to its children, which seemed to take a liking to it, but also seemed to have a craving for human flesh. The cartoon series that follows this movie keeps this nourishment in mind, as not only does Godzilla still like to eat fish, but he also doesn't seem to mind if humans are on the menu, which is an odd eating habit given that the 1998 Godzilla was a mutated marine iguana, which are herbivores. I guess we can write that the radiation possibly tampered with its eating behavior. A different type of this species was shown in Godzilla Final Wars, where it's now referred to as Zilla, and it seems to have the same diet for people as well as fish. Though it's not to be taken too seriously, there is the Godzilla Likes to Roar book. In the pages of this story, it's revealed that the kaiju of Monster Island, or just particularly Godzilla and Anguirus, seem to enjoy palm trees with coconuts. Now that we looked into Godzilla's menu, let's take a look at what other kaiju like to eat. Rodan, from its original film to its latest incarnation, seems to have preyed on just about anything with meat on the bone, whether that be people or the insect creatures called Meganulon, which also had a craving for humans. This trait was carried over into its reimaginings many years later. While on the topic of insect kaiju, there's also the Carnivorous as well as Kumonga, which in their debut film were going after Manila, or the human characters, to try and make them their meal plan. And the Kumonga and Godzilla Singular Point also think humans are a delectable food source. Mothra is an interesting one because while we never see what she eats, it is implied by the Shobi gene that once the young Mothras hatch from their egg, they would go on a rampage and search for food. Given Mothra's caterpillar nature, I can only assume that means she goes after plants or any type of greens that could satisfy her hunger. Some caterpillars are said to be omnivores, though I can't see Mothra going after people for a late night snack. Save for maybe the GMK Mothra, though that is a very big maybe. But let's talk about more kaiju that do have a bloodlust, starting with Gorosaurus, who was hunting Susan in King Kong Escapes. It should come to no surprise that he consumes meat given his carnivorous dinosaur appearance. But oddly, he doesn't appear to hunt down other kaiju for dinner. I suppose he simply has a taste for creatures that are far smaller than himself. Then there's Baragon, who in his debut film went after farm animals as well as people to chow down on. In the same movie, Frankenstein also had a ferocious appetite for meat, but he preferred to prey on small animals instead of humans, such as dogs and rabbits, though at times he does eat normal food like bread. His offspring, however, had different options for meal plans. Sonda leaned more towards veggies, while Gaida went after the citizens of Japan to satisfy his hunger, but didn't have the stomach for the clothes they wore. Ebirah may have also shared Gaida's craving for humans. While we don't ever see the giant crustacean actually eat its victims, it can't hurt to at least imply that it does. I mean, the bodies don't ever surface again, so maybe? Going back to Monsterland, we know that all the kaiju on the island are being fed by the scientists who offer marine life as cattle for the kaiju. So we can assume that all the giants that live on the island have a craving for meat. Though some could also stomach things like greens and fruits that most likely are scattered on the island. The smog monster Hedorah is an odd one though, considering it prefers to feed on pollution, which aided in the muck monster growing stronger. The space monster Dogora came to Earth and consumed both diamonds and coal as a source for carbon. Now, Destroya is another interesting one to look over because in its early stages, it did go after things like fish to feed on, and it's quite possible it also had a hunger for humans. When it evolved into its stronger forms, it now had the ability to absorb energy by way of its second jaw or by its tail. The Mutos are also energy-feeding creatures, as like Godzilla, they consume radiation, whether it be from the Earth or from man-made resources. King Ghidorah is a kaiju that also seems to absorb energy from living beings as a food source, at least in its Heisei incarnations. The Monsterverse one also seems to be an energy absorber, as shown a few times when battling Godzilla. Even though it did eat Dr. Graham in her final moments, it most likely ate her simply for the kill and not so much for hunger. When discussing giant animal kaiju like the condor, rats, and octopus, it's easy to say that they most likely carried their eating habits from their normal-sized counterparts, meaning they do consume meat and would have likely made snacks of their victims had they been successful in grabbing them, save for the one octopus who caught Frankenstein. And that'll do it for now. I know I didn't talk about every kaiju, but I can make a follow-up video to this someday, and talk about other giant monsters that didn't appear in this video. And you guys can help out with that, by leaving in the comments section the names of other kaiju and what they eat. And they don't have to be just Toho monsters, they could be any giant creature you can think of. And on that, I thank you all for watching towards the end of the video, and I'll see you next time.
When you get nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea, Peptomax. Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea, Peptomax. When you need big relief, you need Peptomax. With twice the strength, Peptomax is maximum pink.